So I think like the first thing I would say is verbal. That was like my biggest challenge in general. So for me, I think the first time I gave the exam, honestly, it was nerves as well because I think I started the sections wrong. I saw that also like helped me a lot. And even if I like didn't cross the threshold and I struggled, like again, the email conversations where I got like a lot of motivation to get through it truly helped me.
Mhm.
So I think like if you're going in with deadlines, then we need like a super duper strong strategy in terms of how we're approaching it because the first time around I didn't have that. And there are like there are a lot of people help you, but the only thing is it's very important that we reach out because not everyone's going to sit there and know what you're going through. So it's okay to like drop an email and say hi, I'm stuck, because someone out there would have already seen this and they're really going to help you out. And at least I saw that work for me. So I think it's okay to ask for help.
Hi, Swathi. Thank you so much for coming and congratulations on your amazing improvement to 710 with a V45. I'm sure you must be
Thanks.
ecstatic.
Yeah, very. It was very unexpected for me, but I think like the hard work paid off.
Oh yeah, and you've been putting in a lot of hard work over the last couple of months. There have been a lot of ups and downs, but you've been consistent in your diligence and your drive to an amazing score. So, looking back at all the months of effort, what do you really think was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome on your GMAT journey?
So I think like the first thing I would say is verbal. That was like my biggest challenge in general. So I think like I graduated in 2021 and then I started working in 2022. So there was a big gap when it came to like studying and honestly like going back to academic language versus professional language. So that was like a big challenge for me. So when I started my GMAT journey, I found it very hard to like go back to basics because at the end of the day, that's something that you learn back during your school days in simple things like what is a modifier, what's a noun, those sort of things. And it took a lot of time to like refresh the memory. And again, like in our curriculum, these are like terms and approaches that we normally don't look at. So I think that was like extremely challenging for me. And also, I think like timing it right because sometimes you get so caught up in a question that you tend to spend around 5 minutes, and that's ideal. That's not ideal in a test scenario. So I think that was something that I had to really work on when I started off.
And you really did, right? The result of all that hard work is now very, very clear to us all. But let's take a step back, right? Before we really dive into your GMAT journey, let's give the viewers a bit of a glimpse into who you are and why you're on this GMAT journey.
Yeah, so I'm Swathi Seshadri. I graduated from Christ University in 2021. I work at Goldman Sachs, and I basically started off my GMAT journey because I felt like doing a master's is something that I've always aspired. And I felt that now is the right time for me to take that step. And naturally, the first step to doing a master's, especially I'm looking at finance, so something that's quantitative and super specific in terms of the niche. Is the GMAT journey. So that's why I thought like it's best that I take the GMAT. And again, GRE was also a consideration, but I naturally felt that GMAT is most suited to the test style that I like compared to a GRE. And I also like the curriculum more. I felt that that is something I can learn and like tackle compared to a GRE.
Got it. Okay. So you decided that the GMAT was the exam for you, and it's the first step towards that master's journey, right? So how did you really start preparing for the GMAT? What were your initial first steps?
So my initial first step was first I bought, so I had the GMAT textbook. I had the 2019 OG version that I had purchased long ago because I thought I might do a master's way before, but I mean, life took me in different directions. So I had the textbook. So I started off by doing my basic checks in terms of like what the exam is, what I need to be focusing on the different sections. That's how I started off. But again, like primarily, I sort of started trying to like solve a few questions, but I realized that my approaches weren't right because sometimes like you look at a question and most of the times you rely on your gut feeling rather than like systematic approaches. So that's when you realize I had to like take a step back and rethink my strategy in terms of like self study, and that's when I found e-GMAT. I did like a lot of research, and then I felt that especially with respect to verbal, because like I said, I struggled with that. I wanted to focus on something that will give me like a holistic approach to relearning verbal, if I could say that. So that's when I chose e-GMAT.
Got it. So you decided that, e-GMAT was the way to go for your verbal preparation. And like you mentioned, there was a lot of relearning that you would need to do as well, because the GMAT verbal is different from the way that most verbal or English tests that we've really taken are, because it's not really an English test, it's a logic and comprehension test, right? So when you decided to really start this really relearning journey, what was the first step for you?
So I think like again, for me, my entire relearning journey started with e-GMAT because I had to unlearn everything that I thought I knew and restart and structurize the way I approach things. So for me, it started with the master comprehension. So on the e-GMAT portal, we have this thing called master comprehension, and that just restructures and like lays a foundation actually in terms of like basic verbal concepts that we need to know. And these are like grammatical concepts that sometimes like some people might know, might not know, but like if it's a refresher, it really helps look at a sentence in a different perspective. Because the thing about verbal that I realized was it's not just grammar, right? Like you're putting everything together to understand what the sentence is trying to say.
Mhm,
So I think like breaking the sentence down in different parts and understanding what each part does, I think that
mhm,
helped a lot. And I think like one thing I really liked about the platform is they had like it wasn't just definitions or jargons thrown at you. Like they gave logical examples for you to understand why something did, work, why something worked the way it has to.
mhm,
And another thing that I liked was since it was like explicitly mentioned, for me, like note making helped a lot. So I started taking notes from based on like whatever the platform gave me. And I think like it gave me perspective to create my own examples as well. And that's something that I can verify even with like experts on the platform because it's very interactive. Like if you ever have a doubt, you can put it out there and someone would automatically come back to you and verify your thought process. So I think that's helped me a lot with respect to starting and laying the foundation.
mhm. So it's not just important to learn, the content that's given to you, but it's also important to test whether you can go just beyond the examples and the context given here and you can extrapolate, right? Because on the actual test day, you'll need to go far beyond. So it starts from the first step onwards. So that's good to know. And it's good to know that at every point also you checked in to understand whether what you're doing is the right thing, getting that validation and getting that idea. Because once you set that foundation in stone, every step after that is a lot easier to take, right? All right. So you started with master comprehension. It set the right starting point for you. And then what was the first subsection that you really tackled on the verbal side?
Sentence correction, definitely. So, I mean, I think I took the 4 month course with e-GMAT. And believe it or not, for the 1.5 to 2 months, I only did sentence correction. I know it seems very intensive to think that one section takes you this long, but for me, that actually helped a lot because it's again, when I say sentence correction, it's again not grammatical terms thrown at you. Like each type of question that we can possibly see on the GMAT is tackled over there.
Mhm,
And I understand like a lot of questions might not necessarily be from the OG, but the pattern and the style is very, very similar. So it like kind of helps you get the whole OG experience without naturally using OG questions. So one thing that I also found like super helpful was now I have two repositories with me. One would
mhm,
be the e-GMAT portal and one would be actual OG questions. And again, I automatically felt that if I could tackle the e-GMAT questions, naturally OG questions also become easier to do. And that's not just because the questions seem harder, that's because of the approaches that they had. Like, especially for sentence correction, I think the whole logic of identifying what a comma does, right? That changes like the whole dynamic of a sentence. Like, sometimes when you normally read a sentence, you might have one perception. But if you
mhm,
actually understand the basic role that any like part of a sentence could play, the comma would make a difference and the whole ideology of the perspective changes. And I think that's what helps a lot, especially like with any kind of like verbal subsection, not necessarily sentence correction. So spending a lot of time on sentence correction helped me even with my other subsections.
mhm,
So it's very simple. Like with master comprehension, I had the foundation to understand what each thing meant. And now with sentence correction, I knew how to use it.
mhm,
And again, like I said, like note making was something I religiously followed. And another thing that I genuinely liked about the platform is like the practice questions for verbal, right? So every time you finished a section, there were like quizzes that we had to take.
mhm,
And I mean, again, like no one's gonna police you and check whether you're doing it. But one thing I liked is that like before you give the quiz itself, there's a set expectation.
mhm,
And if you don't meet it, naturally, like my habit was to like go back and re-ensure like why I didn't like do it and revise the concepts again. And another thing that I liked was an error log approach that e-GMAT asked. So for me, error log is something that I've never done, and it was very new, and it was a little tedious at the beginning to like constantly keep track of errors, and especially when you have like a lot of errors, it gets to you, and you're like, oh no, why am I making so many mistakes? But I think like it also helps me to like revise everything I did wrong, right? So if I saw a pattern, I knew that maybe, hey, like parallelism was like a concept that I truly don't understand, and I need to figure out why I'm getting it wrong. So that generally helped. And another thing that I extensively used for sentence correction is like email conversations with my mentors. So every time I got stuck at one level, I used to drop a mail. It might be out of frustration as well, like, hi, I'm like stuck over here. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. But I think like the constant feedback and like honestly the support that I got from e-GMAT itself was like amazing, because every single time I was stuck somewhere, no one told me like, hey, you know what, move on, like go ahead with the next thing. Like I was told to stick on, and I was given like breakdowns of like every single place where I went wrong. And I think that helped me a lot.
Mhm.
And like even one thing that most people would like truly like hate, but one thing I really enjoyed was the cementing process. Like, so once you
Mhm.
finish one subsection, there's a concept where you cement it. And in literal sense, it kind of like is inscribed into your brain. Like now, even naturally, when I look at a sentence, I take a minute and I'm like, oh, I have to pause over here. I'm just like, oh no, I'm done with the exam now. I don't need to do that. But that's how like impactful it is when we do it right. So another thing is like we have the whole 80% threshold for medium, 50% for hard. And it's like a great win for you if you reach a 90% or like a 60%, because you know like you're automatically better than the bare minimum. So I think that also like helped me a lot. And even if I like didn't cross the threshold and I struggled, like again, the email conversations where I got like a lot of motivation to get through it truly, truly helped me.
Wow. So that's a lot, right? So I'm seeing a lot of really great points that went into that SC success. One is that, you never gave up on a topic when you didn't get it initially, right? Whether you worked on it on your own or with a little bit of support, you understood the importance of leaving no stone unturned and perfecting things right then and there before moving forward. That's one thing, right? Then your approach to the error log, which without the error log, one, you wouldn't really be able to understand how many mistakes you're making and why you're making those mistakes. You mentioned finding a pattern. You wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have all the evidence in front of you to draw those logical conclusions, right? And then I love it that you love cementing, right? It can feel like a challenging process to think that, oh, I have to tackle 10 SC questions in both medium and hard. It's really tough and it's really difficult. But like you said, if you've done the work, right, you'll get it right. Or if not, there's just a little bit of additional fixing that we need to do. But it's definitely a process that you can succeed in. And the joy in that success is really, really quite euphoric, right? So I'm really glad to hear that. And I'm also glad to hear how you approached SC, moving away from just a grammar approach. And even when the grammar was necessary, digging in deep to understand really why that was so, why it made sense, right? Not just taking things at face value, but engaging with it to make sure that this was really something you knew in and out. And especially when we look at verbal, RC is a bunch of CR arguments and CR is a bunch of SC sentences. So the fact that you got that basic core unit right, I think really would have set you up for success in both CR and RC to come, right? So
Yep.
all wonderful things so far. Yes.
Yeah. Then I moved on with my critical reasoning. And I think that was one of the hardest things I had to like tackle, because like logically, like when you look at a sentence, you think you know what the author means, but sometimes it's really not that. And I think it took me a lot of time to like understand what the question itself is asking. So
Mhm.
I think like it's reading it right. And again, not just reading it at face value, but honestly taking down the points that the author wants you to see. Another thing that I like liked was there was this one like piece on e-GMAT where they literally walked us through what is your thought process versus what is an author's thought process. And that's something I really enjoyed, because it takes a lot of time to separate the two. Because sometimes you read it, you assume things, and then you think that's what the author assumes. So
Mhm.
I think breaking that down and looking at it just on face value takes a lot. And I think platform really helped me with that. And again, like the CR could say like questions that were there were very different, right? Like I don't think I saw like a very similar pattern in terms of like the questions that came towards me. And I think that was like very fascinating because one time you might use approach A, but for another question you might have to use approach B. But the thing is that once you get very comfortable with like the approaches that are taught, you can actually apply a lot of them to very similar sentences. So I think like it's more about finding your style with respect to critical reasoning, because
Mhm,
like e-GMAT actually like gives you a lot of options, you know, with respect to looking at a question. Sometimes they might specifically talk about pre-thinking, but for some questions you don't need a pre-think, you can do elimination. So I think like it's finding your groove with respect to questions, and that only comes again when I had to like look at the course completely. It wasn't just choosing a part of critical reasoning that I had to do, but I had to look at it like entirely.
mhm,
And also like I think for critical reasoning, cementing was very hard for me to like get through. I think I gave like multiple attempts.
mhm,
And one thing that I really liked about that was even though I had to give multiple attempts, there's this concept where they have where you guys have like the official guide questions as well.
mhm,
So every time you don't cross a threshold, you have to practice OG questions. And again, that gives you another flavor, and you start realizing, like, hey, these are patterns I see with questions. And for these kind of questions, I can use this approach. And I think that was like very useful for me. In fact, like I had to use the OG platform multiple times because I really didn't get through it. But I
mhm,
think that practice really helped for critical reasoning because when I came back to give my cementing, I really could, you know, tackle all the questions that came over there. And even with like my first attempt on the GMAT, I got a 640. My verbal score was really bad. It was only 32. And over there, I think when I looked at my ESR that came out, my critical reasoning was 100% accuracy.
mhm.
So especially over there, I realized that, hey, the approaches that I'm using are right. It's just finesse that I need with respect to getting the right number of questions right in the first go.
Mhm.
So I think like that really helped me with like critical reasoning. And again, the platform, I think like if you use it like extensively, especially with be it ability quizzes or like even the cementing quizzes or in general the scholarium as a whole, you
Mhm.
have a lot of like possibilities to find your own approaches. Because like with respect to lessons, you get everything on a platter for you where you write it down and you know that these are different like methodologies that I can use. But choosing what's right for you comes only with like practicing questions. And I think because of like the vast resources that were there for CR, it was extremely useful for me.
Got it. So what were, at the end of the day, right, if you had to look at your CR processes, what were some key points in that process that you think people might find helpful?
Pre-thinking definitely, especially for like assumption questions. I think that kind of lays the foundation actually, because sometimes when you look at a question, you take a step back, you start thinking what is going to link point A to point B, and that
Mhm,
becomes your assumption. And again, like because of the cementing process, it's kind of like put into your head that this has to be a new information and this has
mhm,
to be a must hold true statement. So that kind of sets it apart a little bit, and pre-thinking would definitely help in most questions. And I think for me, with respect to evaluate questions,
mhm,
because you're literally asking questions, I think elimination worked a lot for me because I think pre-thinking is always there. Like it's going to happen like in the back of your head, but you don't need to actively start doing it once you practice a lot. So
mhm.
it
It's a,
becomes
mhm,
it just becomes like a thing you automatically do,
mhm.
and you're not consciously thinking, hey, I need a pre-think. So I think that really helps you pick up the speed with respect to CR questions. Because when you're not actively pre-thinking and writing down, hey, this might be the assumption, and it's already in your head, you can automatically eliminate the answer choices. So I think that really helped me save like a minute or two with respect to questions. And that's a lot when it comes to CR.
Oh, it's a lot. And I think it also goes to the level of practice, the right kind of practice that you did, that you're able to say this now. Because for most people, even at the end of their GMAT journey, pre-thinking is a very conscious process that they have to take the time and the effort to do. But I think it speaks to your caliber that right now for you, pre-thinking is something that just happens. You know, you see a question, you're able to pre-think for it. So let's not discount the amount of effort that really went into there, because it's a really great thing to say right now that it's something that just flows for you. It's something that you can do with such a level of ease, right? So that's really, really great to hear. And yes, the importance of finding the method that works for you and then sticking to that method as well, right? Not trying to constantly reinvent things is also very, very important. All right. So that was your CR, right? Now let's talk about RC, which was the last subsection for you.
RC, I think I wouldn't call it difficult. It was very tiring to do because like the passages are honestly like really long. At one point, like when you start off, like be it on the exam or even in general practice, you have like a small RC passage and you're like excited, like, yes, I can read it like quickly. But then the next question that you click, it might be like a three-paragraph RC, and you look at it and you're already tired because you know you have to read it. And I mean, there is no shortcut to RC. You have to read the passage because I think like initially when I started off RC, I never got through like the basic quizzes as well because I never liked reading the passage. I used to skim through it and assume that I understood what the author wanted to say. And when I answered the questions, I realized that no, that is not what the author wants to say. So I think in RC, like there's this whole section about how to read an RC passage, right? It took me a lot of time to like take it in. Even during the exam, it was very hard for me. It still is very hard for me to like consciously put in an effort and like read it. But one thing that I really liked was that they told me even if you don't have an interest in the topic that they're talking about, pretend to be interested, and that automatically makes your brain focus more. And it's a very like unique hack, right? Because at the end of the day, like when you're not interested, you're not going to take back anything. And even if you pretend to be interested, at least like on a normal day, let's say you have to take 100% in, you might end up taking 90% at least. So I think that makes a lot of difference, especially with RC passages. And another thing for RC for me was here note making actually helped even in the exam. I used to summarize each paragraph that was there in RC. And when I say summarize, I'm not talking like, write a four-liner on what each paragraph meant because that's going to take a lot of time. I used to write like keywords, at least
Mhm.
like three maximum per paragraph. And then what I used to write is I used to put like a flower bracket and I used to like summarize the entire passage, like this is the objective or something like that, based on my understanding. And then I used to go on to the questions. So I think for me, not reading the question first helped because problem that I faced was I used to read the question first and then look at the RC passage. So naturally, I'm already searching for answers and I'm not taking the information that I need to take in because for RC, it's not very straightforward. Like the questions might have like you need to read between the lines most of the
Mhm.
times. So unless you read the entire passage, you won't know which line to look in between.
Oh,
So
that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put
yeah,
it. But yes, no, that makes a
yeah.
lot of
So I think
sense.
that helped because for RC, like I can't deny that it's very dreading, like to read one entire passage, and you're honestly panicking because you do look at the time as well.
Mhm.
But for me, I split the like naturally there'll be 3 to 4 questions of continuously for an RC passage. So I used to split the time for RC like that. So I knew that the first question is going to take me 5 minutes, where I'm going to read the entire passage and then answer the question. So naturally, for the second, third, and fourth question, I shouldn't be rereading the passage. So
Mhm.
it's okay to take like a lot of time with the first question and not panic. And I think that takes a lot of effort to not panic because you're naturally thinking, oh no, I'm taking 5 minutes or 6 minutes over here. But I do think that's okay. And you need to cover up that time with sentence correction. And I
Mhm.
think that's how my strategy worked, specifically with like the whole verbal section. But yeah, with RC, it was honestly taking interest in the passage. That was the first step in summarizing it.
Got it. Got it. So that makes a lot of sense, right? Again, a lot of key learnings here, I think. One, that you don't focus on the question first, you focus on the passage. And two, that the time that you spend reading the passage is something that you save up, one, by going through the following questions really quickly. And two, also by looking at things like SC and seeing where you can reduce time there, right? So now you really seem to have had all these three verbal subsections individually. You've mastered them, right? So then it's on to actually putting those three together and executing to your maximum possible ability on the test day. The first time you did that, I don't think things went according to plan. You ended up with a 640 with a V32, right? So how did you really change things about what were the strategies that you employed to move from that 32 to a 45 within the span of a month, actually, right?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the first time I gave the exam, honestly, it was nerves as well, because I think I started the sections wrong. I started with quantitative and then I went on to verbal. For the second attempt, I started with verbal and then did quant, because I realized for me, quant, it wasn't about like concepts that I lacked. For me, it was just focus. So it becomes, it was a very muscle memory sort of thing for me with quant. So I knew I was still comfortable in that, and verbal was where I needed to focus on clearly.
Mhm.
Like I only got a V32 over there, so I needed to really buckle up. So I think I can summarize what went wrong with the first one, especially on the verbal section. Is one, I started wrong. So you could say like your brain kind of gets tired with all the quantitative things that you do. So you need to, for verbal you need active thinking,
Okay.
and for quant I felt that I didn't need that. So I think that's the first thing that went wrong for me with respect to my strategy. And the second thing was definitely nerves and time. With verbal, I started panicking a lot when I started giving the questions, because for sentence correction, I spent around 2.5 minutes per question,
Mhm.
because I used to second guess everything I chose. And naturally, because I'm wasting a lot of time, you tend to click the wrong answer.
Mhm.
It's a force of habit, right? You might say
Yeah.
that, oh, I think this is going to be wrong, and maybe this is right, and okay, I need to choose between C and D, and then you see the time and like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to choose D. And that's really a terrible strategy to go ahead with, because sometimes like gut feeling is great, but especially in an exam where you have like a lot of pressure on you to like get things done with respect to like the time frame that's available, gut feeling is not recommended, at least in the first section that we go through. So for me, like with the V32, I got a lot of questions wrong in the first section, which only gave me like medium level questions that I could answer throughout the exam. And that's what dipped my score. So I got my ESR, and then I like went through it, and I sat with even you, and you like really helped me out, like break down what went wrong with each section. And it was honestly surprising, because like on the e-GMAT, like verbal, scholararium, and like general stats, I did tend to do better. So I think
Mhm.
like I needed that boost of confidence as well. And once I got that, like started relearning my concepts. So like I said, I used to do note making. So I made it a practice to read my notes every day.
Mhm.
And when I say every day, I religiously did it every day. Like I used to spend 40 minutes in the morning. I used to
Oh,
wake
wow.
up, first thing I did was read my verbal notes.
Mhm.
Because I felt that the more you keep reading about like the concepts that and lay that foundation back in your head, you naturally start looking at things in that perspective.
Mhm.
Another thing that like helped me was doing a lot of quizzes again, and I had never given a mock before I went in for the first attempt. So this time I changed it up and did two mocks on the scholararium. Again, like I only got, I think, a 640 and a 650 again, but my verbal score improved, because my focus was to get the verbal section better. And I
Mhm.
think like my approaches with mocks were also like a little different. It wasn't like to do everything right. For me, I was focusing on the sections where I needed to get better.
Mhm.
So I used a lot of like my focus and energy on the verbal side of things. And with quant, I was still a little bit more relaxed.
Got it.
And I think I kept seeing like my verbal score improve. It was, I think, roughly a 38 or 39 on the scholararium. And I knew that I could like push further. And I think like I even discussed this with you, and then I think we came up with a strategy that I could start solving OG questions and use the platform more for that.
Mhm.
So that's when I went back to like basic textbook studying, where I used to take the questions, use the approaches that I'm reading about every single day, and then solve the OG questions. And then I started seeing that the rate of answers that I started getting right was like a lot.
Mhm.
And that boosted a lot, like a lot of like confidence. And I think for me, it wasn't like focusing on one verbal subsection, but every single day I used to ensure that I did every kind.
Mhm.
And because you keep seeing these questions, like you become very familiar with the platform itself.
Mhm.
And after that, I think for me, I bought the fifth and sixth official mock, and I gave those. Again, I didn't get like fabulous scores on the mocks. I think I only got a 650 and I think 660, if I'm not wrong. But again, that was like not the greatest score, but my verbal scores were roughly around 39 and 42.
Mhm.
So
So again,
that's
your
when I knew it
focus, so your focus on
was
mocks
more
was
on verbal
again.
side.
Mhm. Got it. Got it.
Correct, yeah. Because for me, I think like a lot of times what happens is that I used to like give mocks and create a very like exam scenario for me, and that used to make me a little panicky, and you start rethinking things. But then I realized that, actually like in an exam situation, I'm going to look at each section as one. I'm not going to look at it as a whole. So I might as well use that same strategy over here. and like focus on what I need to get right versus what I get wrong. So I
Mhm.
think that really like helped me, and I went all out with respect to solving questions over and over again. And this time onwards, like for the second attempt, I didn't use the e-GMAT platform a lot. I primarily use it for quizzes and re-looking at like concept videos. I think that's the approach that worked for me, because the
Mhm.
first time on, I had like used a lot of questions and I knew the structure that's already there. So
Mhm.
this time it was just about refining where I went wrong. And again, the error log helped me because, I mean, this time on, I didn't track my errors. I was looking at what I did wrong previously. So I
Mhm.
knew those were the concepts that are generally weak for me. And even my ESR showed me that. So I relooked at concept videos over there and I relooked at my notes and I focused more on those kind of questions. And
Got.
for me, I think another thing was like the timing,
Mhm.
because I didn't want to lose a lot of time when I was giving my second attempt. And funnily enough, like once I finished my second attempt for the verbal, for the last two questions, I had 10 minutes left.
Mhm.
And like, but during the exam, I was very panicky that I was like, oh no, did I like rush through everything? But I think it really paid off because like, kid you not, like for sentence correction, I barely took like 40 seconds to 1 minute, because it becomes, again, it's making it a muscle memory, because when I look at the sentence I already know what's wrong in it and I can start eliminating things, and that really like helped me a lot.
Got it. So it seems that you went in with a full set of strategies and a whole pathway to success, right? And that's very helpful because you didn't take this as just, you know what, I'll go and do it again. It'll be fine. You set up a very clear journey towards improvement and you executed on each and every step, right? And I'm sure that when you saw that final score, you must have been
I was baffled. I couldn't believe it because I really thought like with 10 minutes left, I had messed it up and I was just like, oh no, not again. But I think I was very shocked. Like I had to like re-look it like multiple times and I was like, okay, this is it now.
this is it. I'm here. Before it disappears, let me accept the score and leave, right? But yes, all right. So it's really wonderful to hear how you approached verbal. And I think it's important for people to understand that this is not a score that came for you just from practice. It was because you genuinely went to the depths of each and every topic. You made sure to understand the why. You made sure that it sat well with you, the knowledge of why you're utilizing a method, the knowledge of that method, right? You really went into the depths of it all. And of course, you practiced. Even the practice that you did, though, you did it the right way with the right intentions. And you made sure that whatever mistakes you made, you tried your best not to repeat them again with the error log. So I'm hearing a lot of great things here, right? But now, sitting at the end of it all with a great score, right? If you had to give just one piece of advice to all the other GMAT aspirants out there, or even to you when you were starting this journey right at the beginning, right? What would it really be?
Honestly, read your notes, make notes, read your notes. It's like your knowledge book, it's your perspective and your learning. And second thing would be don't practice just for the sake of practicing. I
Mhm.
feel like you always need to have an objective when you look at questions, because I think it becomes a force of habit that be like, oh, you know what, I need to finish 50 questions today and I'm going to like practice this. But it's not necessary you need to finish 50 questions. If you do 10 questions right, that makes a lot of difference rather than just doing 50 questions. So, and again, one more thing is that don't set like tight deadlines for yourself, because the first time around I knew I wanted to like do it in 4 months.
Mhm.
And the second time around I knew I wanted to do it in 1 month, but like I knew I could do it in 1 month because I knew I had a strategy in place because I'd already put in the work.
Mhm.
So I think like if you're going in with deadlines, then we need like a super duper strong strategy in terms of how we're approaching it, because the first time around I didn't have that.
Mhm.
And again, like if anyone's using the e-GMAT platform, don't hate cementing. I know it's gonna like be very hard, and you'd literally be in tears at one point saying you might see like one time you'd get like a 60 and next time you'd get a 20 and you'd be like, what have I done? But it's okay. And there are like there are a lot of people help you. But the only thing is it's very important that we reach out, because not everyone's going to sit there and know what you're going through. So it's okay to like drop an email and say, hi, I'm stuck, because someone out there would have already seen this and they're really going to help you out. And at least I saw that work for me.
Mhm.
So I think it's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to say that you're not understanding concept, because someone is going to like reach out and help you get there.
Oh, yeah. Help is on the way. You just need to call for it, essentially, right? But good. I'm glad. These are all really important things for people to remember. I'm not going to add anything onto that, right? But once again, Swathi, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey that you from a V32 to a 45 in just about a month. It's a truly, truly amazing journey that you've had, and it's a testament to the power of diligence and hard work, right?
Thank you.
So, yes, all the very best to everything that's going to come forward, and you know, do keep in touch, right?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Right. So, all the best, happy learning, and take care. Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.